Welcome to the crowd. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. This is Wednesday evening, November 9th. I'll call this meeting to order. If everybody would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Cookie, I'm told I'm to call you Madam Clerk, so I will do so. Even though I've called you, if you please call the roll.
Commissioner Narita?
Here.
Commissioner Lorraine?
Here.
Chair Robbins?
Here.
Commissioner Rowinski?
Here.
And Commissioner Michael?
Here.
Great. Well, welcome back, everybody. Sorry I missed a couple meetings, so it's good to be back myself and folks on Zoom. And I see we're up to 10, so it's not all just staff. Welcome. Anybody who's here in the audience, if you want to participate, there are yellow slips to fill out. There's also a means to, there's an iPad at the back if you want to speak, and a QR code, I think, as well. So let us know if you want to participate. And if you're on the Zoom or on the phone with Zoom, there's a hand raise feature on Zoom. On the phone, you need to hit Stealth 2022. Everybody should have had a copy in their packet. Any questions, comments, or edits? Hearing none, I will move approval of those minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it. I think we can just do it. Aye? Voice vote?
Yes.
You're gonna?
It passes 5-0.
It does. Great. Thank you. So now we're on to public comment, and this would be comment on items that are not on the agenda, and we can't act upon them because they're not on the agenda, but the public is free to raise any issue they wish. Cookie, do we have any requests to speak?
I have Sean Laskin.
All right. And yeah,
hello.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Just one item I wanted to speak to that wasn't on the agenda here. I had just noticed that when we last spoke, I think back in one of the commission meetings in July, I had brought up the topic about bike parking in downtown San Mateo. One of the alternatives to setting up bike racks throughout the downtown area, was just to utilize parking meters throughout our streets in the downtown area. Just wanted to provide just a quick update to the commission on this topic. I was making my way up and down the closed portion of B Street a couple of weeks ago, and I had noticed that the city had actually taken down all the parking meters on the closed section of B Street. It certainly makes sense to do so, given that cars are no longer allowed to park on the street. But in doing so, the city actually inadvertently removed a good section of available bike parking for folks to go to that section of B Street. And now there's no real alternative.
Sir, you're up. Forgive me to interrupt, but we are getting to read what you say at the bottom, but you're not very clear. So I don't know if you can speak more clearly into your microphone or pull away from whatever's getting interference.
Sure. Try and mute and unmute and see if I can switch my microphones as well. I'll try and start again, but maybe abbreviate myself. Okay, great. I had noticed that the parking meters had been removed from the closed section of B Street, which those parking meters were, not that we're allowed to park on that section of the street, but Those were great alternatives for bicycles to park on the closed section of B Street, and with those parking meters now removed, it means that bicyclists and other people who have other micro-mobility options are no longer able to use those parking meters as parking. And now folks don't really have a alternative way of parking on the closed section of B Street. So I was just wondering if the city had perhaps an alternative plan out in the near future for providing bike micro-mobility parking on those sections of B Street now that the parking meters are gone. But other than that, I will yield the rest of my time, and I thank you to the commission for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers for this topic?
No, I see no other speakers for items that are not on the agenda.
Thank you
Through the
very much.
chair, I have a very brief response.
Please.
Sure. So I can just say that as part of the improvements that are currently under design for the closed streets, we are planning to add bike racks to both blocks of the street.
Thank you. That's good to know. Excellent. Okay, we're on to new business. This is leaf blower regulations, and we're not voting on anything tonight, but we are to provide feedback and direction on potential leaf blower regulations. So I will open it up first to staff.
Okay,
Andrea, you're on.
great. My name is Andrea Chow. I'm the Sustainability Analyst with the City of San Mateo. I'm here this evening to present on leaf blower regulations. Leaf blowers cause noise, greenhouse gas emissions, and air quality impacts. City Council identified evaluating leaf blower regulations as a City Council priority for this fiscal year. Leaf blowers are part of an equipment type called small engines, and they combust fossil fuels and emit smog-forming emissions. The California Air Resources Board, also known as CARB, estimates that 1 hour of commercial leaf blowing activity emits the same smog pollution as driving a 2017 Toyota Camry for 1,100 miles. That is why the state has taken action. In October 2021, California became the first state with a statewide ban on new gas leaf blowers and lawnmowers when Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 1346, prohibiting the sale of new small off-road engines beginning January 1, 2024. So CARB recognizes that smog-forming emissions from SOAR equipment now exceed those from passenger cars, but it is important to note that the prohibition of the sale of new SOAR equipment in 2024 would still allow for the use of older equipment. As a result, local restrictions still make sense to evaluate. The City of San Mateo currently has time of day restrictions for leaf blowers in residential zoning districts and in areas bordering residentially zoned neighborhoods. The municipal code limits the use of leaf blowers between 8 and 5 p.m. on weekdays and between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Saturdays. The use of leaf blowers is prohibited on Sundays and holidays. And in addition, the code requires that leaf blowers run at low speeds and use nozzle extensions to minimize noise. These restrictions have been in place since 1997. The city has addressed leaf blower regulations in the past, and in both cases, the City Council and even the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission expressed concerns over the impacts potential regulations would have on commercial landscaping businesses. These businesses are often sole proprietors and minority-owned. In 2020, the Commission was concerned about City Council taking up leaf blower regulations at a time when there were so many other pressing COVID-19 related issues and community concerns. The Commission at that time directed staff to focus on encouraging electric leaf blower use. In July 2021, staff launched the Electric Leaf Blower Rebate Program. The program provides a rebate of up to 75% of the purchase price, a max of $500 to commercial landscapers for electric leaf blower purchase, and up to 50% of the purchase price, the maximum $100 to residents. And that includes the electric leaf blower equipment itself and batteries associated with the equipment. Using the city's business license information, 2 mailers were sent to landscaping businesses in San Mateo to alert businesses about the rebate opportunity. The mailing list includes roughly 150 businesses. And then rebate information was also included in the city's e-newsletter and social media channels. To date, the city has issued 8 commercial landscaping rebates, commercial landscaper rebates, and 30 residential rebates. And the average rebate for commercial business is $311, and the average rebate for resident is $75. And I believe I updated my numbers here on the slide from the report. City parks have been piloting with electric equipment since 2018, and recognizing the state's goal to prohibit the sale of 2-stroke engine equipment and the city's climate goals is preparing for a transition to electric equipment. So this past fiscal year, parks purchased $8,000 worth of electric equipment, including backpack and handheld blowers, hedge trimmers, chainsaws, and weed trimmers. Using the electric equipment in the Japanese garden and on the Spare the Air days has helped parks identify what the challenges and limitations are with electric leaf blower technology. One major challenge with electric equipment is battery life. In most park settings, a blower with 2 batteries provides about 45 minutes of use, and then it requires 2 hours to recharge. So while electric leaf blowers work really well for small sites, they pose some challenges at larger sites where parks staff would need to use multiple batteries. In addition, there is a difference in the performance of electric leaf blowers compared to gas. Electric leaf blowers currently are less powerful, and therefore it does take staff longer to accomplish the same amount of work. It was also helpful for them to provide some cost estimates of transitioning to electric leaf blower equipment. Currently, Parks has an inventory of 12 gas blowers, and they estimated that in an electric backpack blower, inclusive of all the batteries you would need, would cost $1,500 for each replacement. And so an initial investment of $18,000 would be needed to replace the current gas leaf blower equipment. And then they also estimated that about every 2 years they would need some battery replacement, so that's $14,000 every year. What we didn't have estimates for was the cost of electricity and charging infrastructure to charge the electric equipment. But they did have, and then I wanted to compare that. Gas leaf blower replacements cost around $375 plus the cost of fuel. Park's main shop requires some electrical upgrades to continue charging the electric equipment on a consistent basis. That is estimated to cost $20,000, and then additional upgrades at different field shops would be necessary, but has not yet been evaluated. There are a few different policy approaches to modify leaf blower regulations. We could look at modifying our current time of day restrictions and enhancing them. We could consider a gas leaf blower ban, which would still allow electric leaf blowers. And then third, you could consider a complete gas and electric leaf blower ban. So enhancing our time of day restrictions could look differently. I should mention this is the most common type of leaf blower regulation that's seen in jurisdictions. It does help limit the noise impacts, but it doesn't necessarily get at the greenhouse gas or air quality impacts associated with leaf blowers. But there's a few approaches the city could consider to enhance our time of day restrictions. One option is modeling after the city of Burlingame that has a zone approach to their leaf blower restrictions, where they have a map that divides the city into certain zones, and you can only use leaf blowers on your designated day. So it really restricts the noise to particular days in your neighborhood. The city could also consider consider establishing a narrower time restriction. The town of Atherton actually has a much narrower time of day in which leaf blowers are allowed to operate. And then finally, I mentioned in our current regulations, they apply to residentially zoned neighborhood areas and then areas next to residentially zoned areas. So we could expand the restrictions to apply to more areas of the city. The second option is considering a gas leaf blower ban. This is an approach that's been taken by more than 20 cities in California. It addresses greenhouse gas emissions associated with gas leaf blowers as well as air quality impacts, but electric leaf blowers still do cause some noise and fugitive dust. So there are several Bay Area cities that are taking up leaf blower bans that I wanted to highlight. Very recently, the town of Portola Valley adopted a gas leaf blower ban in 2019 with an enforcement date of January 2021. And then the city of Oakland adopted a ban in October 2020 with an enforcement date in April 2021. And the city of Novato adopted a ban just this year, June 2022, with an enforcement date of July 2023. So there's been a lot of activity related to leaf blower regulations. You probably sense a little bit of a pattern where a jurisdiction will adopt an ordinance with a delayed enforcement date to allow some time for education and transition for the community. It is a controversial or contentious issue, though. Just this year in February 2022, the town of Atherton council was very divided on whether to move forward with the gas leaf blower ban and directed staff to do more research and outreach to residents. Similarly, I think it was just in 2021, the town of Hillsborough took up the issue and decided not to move forward with the gas leaf blower ban, but actually with an incentive program for electric leaf blowers. And then I learned recently that the Menlo Park City Council will consider a gas leaf blower ban next year in 2023. And then the third approach is a complete gas and electric leaf blower ban. This approach has only been taken by 5 cities in California. An outright ban on mechanized blowers is probably the easiest to enforce, since it is clear when the user is in violation. And a complete ban on gas and electric leaf blowers addresses all concerns related to noise, emissions, and air quality, but this would have a significant impact on the community, on commercial landscapers, and also on city operations. By banning all leaf blower use, you would require the community to use manual methods like raking and sweeping, and this would greatly increase the time it takes to complete jobs. And then I mentioned there are 5 cities in California that have an all-out ban. These include Santa Monica, Del Mar, Hermosa Beach, Laguna Beach, and Manhattan Beach. And so feedback is needed on these various policy options that were presented. The staff will present commission feedback to the City Council at a future study session to receive direction on which policy options to consider and future implementation. And then community and stakeholder outreach would be conducted prior to moving forward with the adoption of any new policy. And that's it.
Andrea, thank you so much for that presentation. First, we're going to do questions from the commission, and I'll go last. But I do want to mention, back in 2020, I was the lone voice pushing to ban these damn things, and you'll hear that again tonight. But I did not persuade anybody 2 years ago. Questions? Start with Commissioner Michael, if you'd like to.
In thinking about the policies, I'm just more curious. I'm curious if we're trying to, if there's a priority based on complaints or the council or the strategy that I may just not know, if it's to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, pollutants, or noise, if one of those issues is above any of the others, or are they equally being considered?
Sure, I can provide a little bit of more context. I think most of the complaints that are received are related to the noise impacts. Leaf blowers are accounted for in our off-road equipment, in our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and that total category of off-road equipment, which includes like large construction type related equipment, is 8% of our total greenhouse gas emissions in the city of San Mateo. And then I think, so I mentioned like 3 different kind of impact areas. There's noise, there's greenhouse gases, and then there's also like that air quality impact, those smog forming pollutants. That's also been raised as a concern by the community.
Commissioner Orwinski?
Sure. Okay, so Andrea, can you please walk us through, if we look at our current ordinance, what would be the process for enforcement? And, you know, the reason I'm asking that is enforcement is going to be a challenge under our current ordinance or anything else that we put in. But how does that process work? If I'm at my home and I hear a very loud leaf blower, or maybe a leaf blower outside of the 8 to 5 time frame, what would I do? Or how would I file? How is this enforced, is my question.
So code enforcement is responsible for enforcement of our municipal code, including this section of leaf blowers. I had checked in with our code enforcement team about 2 years ago when I had prepared the report for this commission, and I had learned that they estimated that there were about 15 complaints per year, and that citations had not been issued.
Right.
Mostly because when code enforcement team was able to connect with the property owner, which is how they follow up on a complaint, that they receive compliance.
So are they unable to, and that's Public Works code enforcement, not community development?
It's in code enforcement within community development.
Oh, it is community development. Okay, so it's community development code enforcement. And so when they arrive, do they have to physically see the person leaf blowing or using the leaf blower or what? Or how does that, yeah. And here's why I want to get to this is I'm just trying to understand, any policy that we look to develop or any recommendations, it has to be enforceable.
Right. So
I think this is a very difficult area to enforce, by the way. I regret.
I think you're getting at some of the challenges with a potential policy. I think a typical interaction is that code enforcement is not able to catch a violation in the act, and that they'll have a communication with the property owner to understand or to relay the information about our noise restrictions. And it seems that for most of the time, they're able to resolve that complaint during that time.
Right, so that's how they do it. They interact with the property owner, who ultimately, by the way, is responsible for their contractors anyway. And then the contractor then probably talks to their landscaping folks. That's how it typically happens. Okay. So here's another question. So anyway, going back to enforcement. Enforcement's really through the property owner communicating with their
Correct.
landscaper. Okay, and that would probably be the case for any other policy that we would develop.
That is what I've observed with other jurisdictions, that usually in cities where there are currently gas leaf blower bans, it is a responsibility of the property owner.
Yeah.
For compliance.
And that would make sense, because as the property owner, you are responsible for your contractors, and they include the landscapers. Okay. Let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on the disparity between the number of commercial leaf blower rebates and residential? It's almost 4 to 1.
Yeah.
For residential to every commercial.
It's challenging. Yeah, I was hoping that, the rebate program is structured to greatly incentivize our commercial landscapers. I think we sent 2 mailers, as I mentioned, as a means of communicating about this opportunity. I don't really know why that we haven't seen more uptake.
Right. Actually, I don't think I was all that surprised, by the way. when I saw the, in the report. And here's why. I remember back in July of 2021, we were talking about Portola Valley, and that all of those rebates went to residents. So there's some sort of preponderance towards residents versus commercial. And some of that might make sense. Commercially, I might have 6 or 7 properties I have to do in that day where a resident has a single property. You know, if I'm looking at electric right now, you know, if I got 6 or 7 properties, my batteries are just not going to last. So it's probably a combination of gas and electric. That's what I think could be going on. I don't know. So another question is, any thoughts on enticing more commercial rebates? I saw, and I say that, I saw San Mateo, a letter from Michelle Hudson. Where is that? Oh, yes, here it is, yes. From the folks at the San Mateo Climate Action Team, and they had suggested possibly including batteries in the rebate. I don't know whether that might entice.
That's actually already eligible, an eligible reimbursable expense.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and the commercial leaf blower rebates that we have processed have included both the blower system and the battery. and
Okay.
Charger.
Okay, so it's the recharger batteries. Is there replacement batteries? Let me just see here. I'm looking at, yeah, so the program currently includes batteries. Could I get more batteries?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a limit. The limit is the maximum $500.
Right, okay. And that, whatever that limit is, it could be 2 rechargers, 1 leaf
Exactly.
blower. Yeah, okay, as long as you're in that. Okay, all righty. Well, that was maybe something. I think it just simply goes to the fact that the technology for, if I'm a landscaper and I've got 6 properties that day, my electric is just not going to hold out. That's what my instincts tell me. Rebates from other agencies. You know, the city has a leaf blower rebate, which now we've discovered includes as many batteries and rechargers and the leaf blower itself. But there is rebates offered by California Core, CARB, and Bay Area Quality Management District. Now, the management district is just for lawnmowers.
Yeah, they currently do not rebate leaf blowers.
Right, right. And actually, just so everybody knows, that rebate, there's no money. So when you go there, it says, you know, to be continued sometime. But explain to us and our residents here, can these rebates work for, and it looks like it's more on the commercial side, could I take advantage of several rebates at one time? Do we know that?
So there are currently written into our rebate program, there's no restrictions on whether or not you could get a rebate from a different agency. And that state program that you're mentioning just launched, so it would not preclude you from.
California Core? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you would be able to layer rebates.
Okay, so if I got a rebate from the city for $500, then I went to California Core, which has a list of, I saw 7 leaf blowers that are eligible. I could then I saw some of those rebates were up to $450.
Right.
Right. It's a lot of paperwork, but if I wanted to do that, I can do that.
Yes.
Okay. And then what's the relationship between CARB and Bay Area? Does CARB issue rebates, or do they do that through the district agencies?
So CARB is a state agency, and the Bay Area Air Quality Managed District is a regional agency. It appears that CARB is partnering with local vendors to distribute vouchers for the electric equipment.
Right.
So it's being administered through the vendors, I believe.
Okay. All righty. Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Lorraine?
Thank you. Andrea, in your report, you detailed some of the potential costs for the city to transition completely its equipment from gas to electric. But is there an estimate of the gas cost that could help contextualize the difference?
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't include that in the report. So the gas-powered leaf blowers are estimated to use $11,700 of gas per year. And that's using, yeah, there was some math behind that from our Parks Department.
Okay, thank you. I think that sort of segues into me just wanting to ask you if you saw the email from Carol Wilhelmi with the attached report and just like your thoughts or staff's thoughts on its findings and whether it seems like a fit with what you were describing in terms of cost comparison and contrast when switching to electric.
I'm sorry, can you provide like specific examples from the report that you'd like me to comment on?
Well, I guess just, I mean, like, I think the high level findings from what I saw in a when I read through it was that, the long term, there'd be a significant savings potentially year over year, potentially even including the cost of replacing batteries, for example, given how much it might cost per year for the gas equipment. And so does that, in your assessment of what it would cost for us to switch, does that mesh or is that, off?
Sure. So I'm looking at, and I provided some of this information in our report, but there is a high initial investment, I think that you're acknowledging, to switch to electric. But the ongoing cost of comparing gas leaf blowers or gas equipment to electric equipment, according to our current estimations, so I do not have the cost of electricity to charge the battery equipment calculated. And so the cost comparison I can offer you right now for charging the electric equipment, I guess, is like $7,000 per year for additional batteries, so considering that. And then I just gave you the number of like roughly $12,000 per year based on current gas prices, which, would fluctuate. This is,
of course,
by the way, at $6 per gallon. So that's what I can offer you preliminarily right now, but I think we'd want to study that more,
of course,
and evaluate it further.
Of course, thank you. Do you have a sense, Andrea, about how long this equipment lasts, or how long it would take to get to the point where you would need to replace a backpack that we have, for example?
I want to say it's 8 to 10 years, but I think I'd also want to check in with our Parks Department to make sure they feel comfortable with that estimate.
8 to 10 years. Okay. What sort of feedback have you gotten from the businesses that have participated in our rebate program?
The businesses that participate in the rebate program are I spoke with one. They were very excited and wanted to make sure that their equipment arrived during our eligible rebate time, but that is really the amount of communication I had with that particular business.
Okay. I guess I'm a little curious about the fact that it seems that the average rebate amount is not the maximum, but when you speak of like the cost of our backpacks being over $1,000, for example, it would seem to me that like if a company wanted to replace even just one backpack, they could get the full 500 potentially for it. Do you have a sense of like why companies are not getting 500 maybe?
So there were, I think, 2 companies that submitted for multiple rebates. So I showed on the table that there were 8 total rebates issued. So one company was issued 2 rebates. So their rebate amount was likely closer to that $500 mark.
Okay.
That
Okay.
probably helps clarify.
Yeah. Do you see any issues with opting into a regional restriction policy like Burlingame's, where we might, like, I guess it seems to me we could potentially split into like the city's districts. Does that seem feasible to staff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of education and outreach that needs to happen with any policy approach. So there's likely to be some transition time needed to make sure property owners can communicate with their landscapers about the new policy impacts. Yeah, I think it's a very viable option to consider.
Excellent, thank you. And has the city tried other methods of landscape maintenance that don't require leaf blowers, such as those that have kind of been suggested by some of our public comments in emails?
I'm sure that they've tried other approaches, and I would want to follow up with Parks so that I could represent them accurately.
Of course, thank you. Those are my questions.
I can respond a little bit to that a little bit further. So some of the approaches recommended, like leaving leaves on the ground, is not necessarily workable in our like more active use parks where people are using playing fields or in our landscaping beds. Way back when, even before I was with the city, when the first round of considerations of leaf blower policies, they did do some tests to see how much manual labor it would take to do the same job with rakes as it does with leaf blowers. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I do recall it was a pretty significant increase in labor hours that would be required. And Andrea didn't mention it, but we don't have a quantifiable number of this, but there would be some increase in labor hours for city staff using the electric equipment because it is a little bit less powerful, but not as extreme as using rakes across all our parks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Narita.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Andrea, for your presentation. And I sent over some questions beforehand, and for the benefit of the public and the rest of the commissioners, I wanted to go over a few of them with you. If we were to look at the second option of a gas ban, gas leaf blower ban, is there any constraints on the time delay that could be allowed, for an enforcement date?
A gas leaf blower ban would be adopted by municipal ordinance, and so that is up to the city council to select that enforcement date. But as I mentioned, it seems a common practice in other cities to adopt an ordinance with a delayed enforcement date. But there's no other timing constraints like we had with REACH codes and building code cycles.
Great. And then I'm particularly interested in the health side of this issue. And so I asked you about, is there any research on health impacts to, workers who've used this equipment and stuff like that. And you pointed me to a 2000 report from CARB, but just wanting to confirm there's nothing more recent in the research in this space, or would this be something that you potentially explore in your, future research on this issue?
I couldn't find anything more recent, and I have been looking at a variety of other agencies and their research on leaf blower regulations. But I will mention the human health impacts that were cited in that report still likely very much apply to gas leaf blowers. So, the technology has advanced, even gas leaf blower technology. They've had, here in California, they would have had to meet newer restrictions from CARB related to air quality and exhaust emissions. But there's still particulate matter that is kicked up into the air with leaf blower use. There's noise impacts, directly to the user who is using the equipment. And then, as I mentioned, the exhaust emissions and that impacts the operator as well.
Yeah, and I'm also holding, there's recent research from Stanford and other universities about the toxicity and carcinogenic materials in gas itself. And I'm just curious, they're leaking into our homes through our gas stoves and our gas fireplaces and our gas water heaters. And I'm just very curious if, an operator is exposed to a higher carcinogenic load like benzene. Accordingly. So, but that's like intersection of like new research and like this issue, right? That I guess would just maybe would come up in future in your future research. I was also curious about the logistics of recharging on the electric side sound really cumbersome. So if you were like a commercial landscaper and you did, I don't know how many houses they do a day, but it's multiple houses, right? And if it's 45 minutes of use, maybe you're lucky if you get 2 houses in 45 minutes, but chances are maybe 1, in which case you have 2 batteries per house, basically per house that you would go to if you were a residential, if your main clients were residential customers. Like, is that reasonable estimate? Because then you'd have to have like a bank of what, like maybe 15, 20 batteries in your truck to like actually operationalize on this if you were to do all electric.
Yeah, I think battery limitations remain a huge barrier to electric equipment. And you're right, you would need a bank of batteries in order to service multiple households per day. And then charging them overnight also must be considered, because conceivably, I don't think expecting a household to charge all of those batteries at one time makes sense either. So.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking though about technology acceleration due to statewide policy. We didn't talk about this offline, but now I just thought of it. Like, when it came to electric vehicles or when it comes to other technology, this policy that CARB has in place to basically stop all of this equipment in January 2024 new sales is a technology forcing policy in a way. And so in your research, have you looked at any like prior types of technology forcing policies and seen like how that has improved different technologies, or could that be part of your future research?
Yeah, that can certainly be part of my future research. But yeah, I think the state context is important, and we'd hope to see advances in the electric equipment itself and the batteries.
Yeah, okay. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know the answer to a couple of these questions, but I want to get them on the record. Have we had the opportunity to have a comprehensive analysis or discussion with landscapers or interested homeowners?
No, that definitely needs to be part of future discussion
Okay.
and policymaking.
And have we had that sort of conversation with neighboring cities?
I've reached out to neighboring cities to understand the status of leaf blower regulations. So the ones I mentioned are the ones taking action on leaf blowers currently.
Right. We'll get back to that in a moment. Or later on. I think this works when you have the market working together and not a hodgepodge, because that's just how people operate. The rebate program that we did, how much money was devoted to that? I'm trying to recall.
I'm trying to recall too.
I think we set aside about $5,000. We didn't come close to hitting it, and we're continuing to set it aside every year. And we don't have a hard cap. Like, if we exceeded that, we could find say it was 7,000 or something, we could find the funds.
So we've not used up the full 5?
I mean,
Okay.
Per year.
Per year?
Yeah, we've used
Yeah.
less than 5 per year. Maybe closer to 3,000 or something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
And have we looked for a source of funds if we were to expand that rebate program, particularly with a mandate that would force it? Have we looked to those sorts of funds, or not yet?
We've not yet.
Okay. That's it on my questions.
But
I have a few comments later.
To add to that, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if we could likely, as the city, absorb a higher allocation.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah. Cookie, do we have any public comments on this? Madam Clerk? Sorry.
Okay, I have, excuse me, I have Christine G.
Do you know how many we have? Just the...
5, and I have 2 in the audience. I'll actually call the 2 in the audience after Christine.
Okay, let's do 3 minutes, and I'd ask people to try to stick within the 3 minutes, please.
Can you hear me? Wonderful.
Yes,
Thank you,
please.
Andrea, for your presentation. I really would like to highlight the effect of the health impacts, because I think one of the biggest ways that leaf blowers have impacted my home is that I'm in a pretty dense neighborhood. So when we have the windows open during warmer months, I occasionally have to jump up and close all the windows to try to stop the gas fumes from filling my home. Since we live in a dense neighborhood and everybody's doing it at a different day, it becomes an everyday sort of issue of trying not to be breathing gas fumes in my home. I also was wondering and would be curious to know, talking to Portola Valley, whether they've had impacts on the businesses, whether those have actually borne out, or whether people, we have the data to see whether those concerns are actually realized, and sort of are people still getting the same amount of landscaping that they had previously been getting. I also would wonder whether a lot of these concerns are, at least the reasons being given, are having to do with challenges for very big parks, and having to clear, really situations where you have to clear leaves, which I really appreciate, from sports fields. And so I've wondered whether the city has considered exempting properties of a certain size or parks of a certain size where there is a genuine need to sort of address the nonlinear impact on job size for that size of property, and whether that could solve a lot of the residential issues while not having to sort of solve everything all at once. And I just would like to voice support for continuing to trying to understand alternative landscaping alternatives. And so with that, I would like to yield the rest of my time. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is in the audience, Carol Wilhelmi.
48 California cities currently ban the use of gas blowers, with 6 of them banning the use of all blowers, gas and electric alike. I would like to see a ban on all blowers, but I've been told by various elected officials that this is unlikely to happen. This equipment serves no great purpose unless you think that harming the health of humans, wildlife, pets, topsoil, and biota is a good thing. So therefore, please, dear commissioners, please recommend enactment of an ordinance banning at least the use of gas-powered leaf blowers now. This is not really a climate issue. It's a serious health problem for the residents of San Mateo and the workers who operate the equipment. On Monday, November 7th, the California Air Resources Board announced an incentive program to help commercial landscapers purchase new zero-emission leaf blowers and other landscape maintenance equipment. The amount is up to $400 off each blower, plus up to $1,000 or more off batteries, depending on battery size, plus more for chargers. Landscape maintenance professionals can buy multiple blowers and other tools up to $25,000 in discounts per company. The cost of the program is $27 million. It will result in cleaner air, fewer asthma attacks, fewer heart attacks, fewer cancers, fewer eye and respiratory infections, fewer strokes, fewer medical visits, and lower medical bills, less noise and less disruption to work and learning, less smog, better equity and worker safety, and let's not forget our pets and wildlife who will benefit as well. Please, everyone, tell your landscape maintenance professionals about this program. And please, commissioners, if you haven't already, read the report I sent to you a few days ago about the economics of switching from gas to battery-powered blowers. Landscape maintenance professionals will realize a positive return on investment within a year, especially with the help from the state's incentive program. I'm optimistic that enforcement will not be a problem. I know of multiple cities that have only had to send warning notices, not actually issue citations for leaf blower violations. I also recommend that the property owner be made responsible, not the business owner or worker. San Mateo can do education and outreach to prevent compliance problems. Finally, regarding the health of the city parks maintenance staff, I spoke with the public services supervisor of the city of Coronado in early 2021 who said, switching to battery-powered blowers and weed whips was the best thing I could have done for my workers. Thanks, commissioners, and thanks for your report, Andrea.
Thank you.
Next speaker in the audience, Bill Scheidlnick. Scheidlnick?
Yes, good evening. In the not too distant future, those who come after us will certainly ask a few obvious questions. First, why, if they knew the vast majority of plastic is not actually recycled, why did they continue to use those big blue bins? And secondly, why in the midst of an ongoing severe drought did they continue to sprinkle the majority of their water through the air onto patches of grass only for it to run into the gutter and into the water treatment plant? Leaf blowers are a tool in keeping these patches of grass, all in the pursuit of a clean lawn. By removing the debris that worms love, the soil becomes as hard as concrete, unable to survive naturally. Chemical fertilizers are spread and the majority end up in the water supply. The clean lawn is not sustainable and is a relic of the 1950s, yet it is the largest crop grown in San Mateo. By banning all leaf blowers beginning in 2024, you will send an important signal to the community, not unlike the ban on new gas appliances or the ban on new gas cars. Replacing lawns with gardens and rewilded landscapes is already happening across the city, and there is huge market potential for true gardening services and regenerative products like compost and compost tea. Regenerative gardening is a growth industry, and we should support the transition of grass cutters into the stewards of soil we need to survive this climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker calling in is Carol Steinfeld.
Carol, can you unmute yourself?
Carol, if you want to speak, can you raise your hand again?
But I'm not muted now.
Oh, great.
There you go. We got you.
There was no microphone appearing until a couple seconds ago. And thank you, Commissioner Robbins, for your call for a ban 2 years ago. Just some quick points. Landscape maintenance firm in Santa Cruz showed that using rakes and brooms is more profitable for a business without adding much time, if any, to a job. There's even a video showing a comparison of a rake versus a blower in action. And of course, this practice also avoids the proven respiratory impact, which we just heard about. Another point, the city of Palo Alto prohibits use of gas leaf blowers in residential areas. So that's a model to consider. And also, a landscape maintenance firm who used to work on my yard when I rented downtown told me that using machinery is the standard because it gives the appearance of providing a higher value, a specialized service, when in fact rakes and brooms would be just as effective, he said, and less costly for him. And my neighbors in my current spot in Baywood must have 20 leaves to pick up on their tiny yards, my immediate neighbors. Yet their landscape maintenance crews use leaf blowers for like 20 minutes per yard. One of them even held it while he picked up leaves with his hands. Thankfully, down the street, I've seen landscape workers using rakes. So somebody spoke to them, or maybe this is how they conduct their business. So I just think we need to broaden our scope of what's possible and what's effective. This is a practice that needs to be transformed. I'm so old that there were no leaf blowers when I was young, and I grew up in places with more leaves. There were snow blowers, no leaf blowers. So leaf blowers are often unnecessary, and let's remember that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next person is phone number 239, last digits 239.
Hi, good afternoon, or good evening, actually. Thank you very much. My name is Frank Terry. Thank you very, very much for this discussion. Allow me to give you the perspective of someone who deals with multiple leaf blowers every day, about 6 days a week. In 2020, I attended this meeting, and very much like the chair, I was horrified about the decision. And since then, I've been trying to work with the city to at least curb the ordinance violations that we have on a daily basis. So ordinance violations here, we have landscapers that are simply too loud. We're talking about 90 decibels over a distance of 50 feet. We have landscapers that plow before, after hours. We have landscapers that plow at 7:30 in the evening. We have landscapers that come every holiday that falls on a Monday. We are awoken by a leaf blower next door because it's not enforced. And lastly, we're talking about blowing the stuff all over the place into the street on other properties, like the previous commenter said. They're not picking it up. It's just being blown everywhere. The responses I've got over the years was always the same. It's not enforceable. I talked to the code enforcement office, and by the way, the number of 15 is wrong. I can tell you that because I alone spoke with them more than 15 times per year. The reason the number is wrong is that there is no dedicated metric for leaf blowers. So every complaint that is called in as a leaf or for leaf blower purposes is being put in some general metric, and it's not being pointed out as a leaf blower complaint. So the response I always got was it cannot be enforced for the same reason. We have to be there to witness it. So what did I do? I sent them a list. I sent them a list of the places and the times when these incidents occurred. Didn't help anything, right? It just continued, and the city really used this very, very convenient way of shirking the responsibility and leaving the status quo as it is. I made a suggestion of how to improve enforcement. We have a parking enforcement group that is traveling the city streets. In every neighborhood, it would be very easy for them to have a look out and enforce these things. So in the meantime, the result of this is my kids, my kids' friends, their classmates, all the kids, they walk through daily clouds of toxic when they walk to schools. They are exposed to the noise every day. There are studies out there that clearly link the increased noise level to a lack of cognitive capabilities in kids. All this doesn't really mean anything because the leaf blowers have, to this day after 2 years, they go on as strong as they have been. So I'm really, really grateful about this discussion. I would urge you to come up with either a ban of all leaf blowers or the gas-powered ones. But the critical task here is enforcement. As long as we don't have an enforcement plan in place, we're going to kick the can down the road. We're going to have the same thing that we had the last 10 years where the ordinances are on the book and they cannot be enforced. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Michelle Hudson.
Michelle, you muted, I think?
Yes, I just got the microphone popping up. Thank you, Commissioner.
Very good.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Michelle Hudson. I'm a longtime resident of San Mateo and co-leader of the San Mateo Climate Action Team. The following comments are made on behalf of 33 San Mateo residents. With respect to leaf blower regulations, we recommend 4 actions. 1, effective January 1st, 2026, ban the use of all gas-powered landscaping equipment in San Mateo. 2, enforce the widely ignored operating hours for leaf blowers and enforce the limits on noise levels. 3, expand the city's electric leaf blower rebate program beyond the current limit to help cover the cost of additional batteries. And thank you for clarifying earlier that the rebate program does include additional batteries. 4, study alternative landscaping methods that involve decreased use of leaf blowers. We recommend these actions for several reasons. Above all, the environmental and health damage done by gas-powered leaf blowers is severe. We ask that the city continue its sustainability leadership by facilitating a rapid transition from gas-powered leaf blowers to zero-emissions models in our city. We recognize that battery life makes switching from gas to electric a challenge. One solution is to expand the rebate program beyond the current limit to help cover the cost of additional batteries. An alternative is for homeowners to assist landscapers by providing fresh batteries to enable landscapers to swap out to depleted batteries. Again, the city could assist homeowners with this by expanding the rebate program beyond the current limit to help cover the cost of those additional batteries. An outright ban on gas-powered landscaping equipment, effective January 1st, 2026, gives landscape professionals 3 years to find electric battery-powered alternatives. With financial assistance from the new CARB program and the city's rebates, and with help from their customers, this is an equitable and fair approach. Finally, the problem of leaf blowers potentially could be addressed through alternative landscaping methods that involve less frequent use of leaf blowers, which methods could also yield other environmental benefits, as other speakers have addressed this evening. We ask that the city further study this option. Thank you for your consideration.
Michelle, thank you very much.
Next speaker is Pam Rettelmeyer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chow, for your presentation and commissioners. Like the first caller, I live in a dense neighborhood and I have to close my windows when the landscapers come blowing the leaf blowers, because otherwise the smell of gas permeates through my home. And I've learned, for the past 2.5 years, I've been teaching college classes online, and I've learned that I cannot schedule classes on the day of the week that the landscapers come, because even with the windows closed, the noise is frankly much too loud for me to teach a class. And I never know exactly what time they're coming, so I have to block out the entire morning to not teach anything or have any meetings where I'm going to be making a presentation. So it's very limiting for my job. And I brought this up to my landlord, but they said that they're not going to stop the landscaper from using these leaf blowers because, well, frankly, other neighbors use them. So why should my landlord say anything to the landscaper? It was their response to me. So even with the leaf blowers, our streets are still covered with leaves, especially this time of the year. And so obviously they're not doing the job that people think that they're actually doing. So we're putting up with all of this noise and pollution for what? I appreciate the 3 options that Andrea Chow brought up, but there's also another idea, like the city of Palo Alto banning on residential. What about a proposition to ban on residential, commercial, and city properties of smaller sizes? So less than a certain percentage of an acreage, or maybe a certain distance from the nearest neighbor. So especially in these dense areas, this is where we're having the biggest problem. So maybe there could be exceptions for larger properties to continue until they can figure out, a better option. And lastly, I'd like to say, this is not just a city issue. A lot of these landscapers actually cross jurisdictional boundaries for their jobs on a daily basis. So I really urge the city to work with other cities in the vicinity to try to come up with a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mike Swire.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
Great. Thanks so much for the presentation and for the consideration. I have 2 kids at San Mateo High School, and I work with the school and the school district on increasing the number of kids that are biking and walking to school instead of arriving via cars and creating traffic and pollution, et cetera, et cetera. And thus, I think it's imperative for us to ban the gas-powered landscaping equipment. I'm not sure how often you either bike or exercise or walk anywhere near these devices, but it's really dangerous and not fun, and it discourages people from getting outside and getting out of their cars. Between the toxic gas fumes, the leaf particulates that hang in the air, if we really want to move towards more people, especially kids, biking and walking instead of being in cars with their fancy HEPA filters to protect them, we need to keep the air clean, and this is one of the best things that we can do. I think the problem is only going to worsen as we move towards denser neighborhoods, and we will see more incidences of asthma as people inevitably live closer and have fewer options to get away from this stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I see no more speakers.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much, everyone. I will bring it back to the commission. Since I went last time, I'm going to go first this time. It's my prerogative. Rarely exercised. These darn things truly pollute. They do. And I'm not sure why we have somehow treated them differently than all the natural gas appliances that we regulate the heck out of for new development. These things are worse. They're two-stroke. It's oil and gas. They're horrible. They're noisy also. I think the argument about batteries is a non-argument. If anybody's ever had a contractor at their house do any other heavy labor, they all bring electric equipment. If they need to, they swap out the 3 or 4 batteries as they're putting on your new roof, or if they need to, they'll borrow and plug into your electricity. Since I have solar, I'm happy to let them do that. The issue is just needing to adjust. And just like homeowners who are having to adjust to the fact that when they do a remodel, or developers, when they develop high density, they're going to have to put in electric stoves and electric dryers and go down the list. I think homeowners and landscapers are just going to have to suck it up and adjust. I don't think it's that difficult. I think there's just sort of a resistance to change. I think the reality is, everybody, we've got AB 1346 out there. New equipment's going to be banned in a little over a year. So, the things don't last forever. The real issue is, do we just wait till they die out on their own, or do we speed the transition? And I think we can speed the transition and make it much faster. So I strongly recommend that we look into a gas ban with some sort of transition time, a gas blower ban with some sort of transition time, and a rebate program. That's why I asked about the source of funds. Now, I know, just so everybody knows, where this is going to go next is going to go to City Council for study session. So I'm trying to give a little bit of what I would ask staff to look into and have some of this data for the study session. If you actually, can see what kind of funds are available easily, and then obviously there's harder money to get, but it can be done, to what would be necessary to actually maybe do a bigger rebate and actually allow people, we're talking about working folks who run and work at these landscaping outfits, but allow them to make the transition faster without as much economic hardship. I would also ask staff to do outreach with landscapers. I suspect the owners are going to have one point of view. I think the workers might have another, but at least we could get some data points there. That would be useful. And then strongly, something I know you've already started, but to coordinate with neighboring cities, because it really works best if San Mateo, Belmont, Burlingame, Hillsborough's kind of hopeless on these things, but we could try. Can actually, I'm just being blunt. If the market for the landscaping businesses are all being treated roughly the same, then the transition will make much more sense than somebody who owns a company that's using gas blowers in San Mateo but not in Burlingame, that kind of thing. And bear in mind, by weird coincidence, I spent some time with a representative on CARB last night. It was purely politics separately, but Davina Hurt, who is an old friend and is on our neighboring city of Belmont City Council, is our representative on CARB from this area. And CARB would be happy to help us coordinate with all the other cities in the area and do something in this area. Lastly, I do think it's a side issue, but shouldn't be forgotten. Noise is an issue. Electric doesn't do away with it, but it makes a huge difference. I would toss out that I think the zone concept, given how many people work remotely, and I'm one of them, would be helpful. We heard one of the speakers talk about the need to, not be able to teach classes on a day. Well, if you know that there will be no leaf blowing on Tuesday and Thursday, or certain days, you have a little better ability to schedule your timing. That's it. Those are my comments. I will go down to Commissioner Narita.
Thank you. So thank you so much to all the public commenters today. Really appreciate your time and energy on this issue. So a couple themes, I guess, in terms of feedback. I'm very amenable to the second option in terms of exploring a gas gas leaf blower ban for sure. And so to that end, I would be very curious to understand in your research, Andrea, going forward for the study session, right, the health implications, if that can be updated. I know it's just been 22 years since that report, which, it'd be helpful. And also understanding how, things are going in Portola Valley and Oakland, and having those as really helpful case studies, I think will provide a lot more assurance to a new council, right? That this issue has been thoroughly researched for the third time. And then in terms of just overall, I'm also open to, understanding more about zones to address the noise pollution issues. My main concern is health, secondarily GHGs and noise. And so I would be interested in understanding, how does that actually get enforced and how does that actually get implemented successfully? Because it just sounds like it's going to be a really complicated puzzle for residents and for their landscapers who span multiple cities. So I just don't know how that mental jigsaw puzzle is done, but I'm very curious to learn about that. I think the stakeholder engagement piece will be key. I don't think it's sufficient to just do the standard mailer thing. I would actually look at what Public Works was doing when they went out into the community a little more aggressively. They had great success engaging at certain events or places in the community that overlapped with interested stakeholders. I think they went to Mi Rancho, for instance, to engage Latinx community members. So what is that intervention point, the equivalent kinds of intervention points for the landscaping community? I don't know. Is it going to just staking out the gardening shops and the whole, what is it? Where are those? But being a little more creative, because I think it will be unacceptable to do anything on a policy without engaging the business community, especially this one, because it is disproportionately, contractors and disproportionately Latino. And so just naming these dynamics at play, it is fundamentally different than doing things on stoves and on water heaters, because those are one-time interventions. This is a cyclical thing that happens all the time for this community of professionals. And so it can, if you reduce, if all of this sums up to reducing the number of houses they can go to by one each day, that's a huge percentage of their potential income, right? So this is very real impacts that could actually occur, and so we need to be respectful and really thorough in that stakeholder engagement, or else I think we fail. I also would love to just unpack and understand other case studies of the technology forcing piece. I want to shorten the life of the existing existing gas equipment out there right now. I don't think just waiting for the things to end is sufficient. And so what does that look like? And what has that looked like in past cases can also be a helpful data point for a new council to feel assured that, you know, this can follow the same kind of curve that other things are. And like induction cookware is like one of the big ones I feel like is like a really good recent one where that stuff is like awesome now. And wasn't before. And I think that's it. Oh, and then obviously, you know, all the various language dynamics. Like, I don't think it'll be sufficient to just look at the business records or whatnot for the landscaping community, but like, how do we do all the language dynamics? How do we actually get an accurate demographic, like, not accurate, I should say, but a rough demographic of the professional community, and also how it spans. It's not just because they're like, I remember for the rebate program, it was like businesses that were registered in San Mateo were the ones outreached to. But I think given the regional nature of this work, how do you start to, like, maybe CARB can help us think through in creative programming with neighboring cities to actually do something a little bit more thorough and aligned on that front. And I would be very amenable to additional incentives and whatnot as needed to address the burden. I am skeptical of the resident, like the property owner, having things like batteries on hand for this sort of stuff. Like, just the logistics of that. Like, I own a house now in San Mateo after all these years, and like I have this gardener, like, you know, a gardener myself, and it's like, where would I put that stuff to make sure that I can remember it and they know where it is, and then like make sure they can charge it when we don't have external chargers. Like, the logistics of it are just really tough, I feel like, actually to implement, and I'm like the most aggressive, I would aggressively want to do it, you know? So like, how do you actually make this really easy for property owners too? And maybe the technology will be there in 2 years, but just right now I'm lacking a little confidence on that. So thanks.
Commissioner Lorraine.
Thank you. I would say I'm generally in agreement with the previous two commissioners who have already made comments. I would support, to me, I think there may be an opportunity here, given that this is a council priority, we're having this conversation again, and now that we're a bit farther out of the pandemic, and we have something like CORE, it seems like momentum is building. We could have an outreach that perhaps starts with a ground floor of proposing something like this Burlingame style zone change to combat the noise issues, and then leaving on the table a gas ban with some information provided to get input from the community and stakeholders. Some examples have already been given by the previous commissioners. I would say, I think one compelling argument that was made in what Carol shared with us is the long-term potential for savings if companies can begin investing in this and are able to make that higher initial outlay. So I'm excited at the prospect of reaching out to see what the response might be to proposing a gas ban, particularly with some room for tweaks like a delayed implementation, as has been discussed, and or right sizing to specific parts of the city, as has been discussed, such as in Palo Alto. To me, I think that might be how we get this done. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Orwinski.
Okay, Andrea, I'm going to, you proposed kind of 3 potential policy alternatives. I will share with you at this point, I'm not comfortable with a gas ban or a gas electric ban. And partly, and I'll share with everyone, I live in a very dense area of San Mateo as well. And I no longer work in San Francisco. I work in my home office 6 days a week. So I hear it, I smell it, I get it. But I also have to be sensitive to the people livelihood. These people earn roughly, pulling up, Andrea, back in July, you had brought to our July of 2021, we were talking about the rebate, you had brought to our attention that of the landscapers who pay our business tax, they pay the lowest threshold of tax. That is, the tax is based on your gross revenues, and they pay within the tax 0 to 30,000. They're in that bracket. So these people don't have a lot of money, and I want to be very sensitive to that. As we start to phase out gas, it's going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. So with that, I'm going to highly encourage staff, and I think you know this, is we need to reach out to the landscapers and ask them about the impact on their business. We've heard from a lot of people tonight, but we didn't hear from landscapers. And so that's really key. So with that understanding, let's talk about the time of day restrictions proposal. I like the one in Burlingame. I've always liked the one in Burlingame. And I like it for a couple of reasons, kind of to dovetail off a comment that Commissioner Robbins had said, is trying to have similar policies geographically. Burlingame and San Mateo share a border. And currently there's nothing going on in Belmont that I can see. So I'm interested in the time of day restriction. I like Burlingame's approach, where each of us will know the day that you're going to hear your leaf blowers. Part of the problem is I hear leaf blowers 6 days a week where I live. So if I know I'm going to hear my leaf blowers on Wednesday, I can prepare for that. And there was a woman, I think it was Pam, talked about, if she has some certainty, then she can kind of plan her teaching around that. So I do like that. But I think also, too, I might take a step back and looking at this, in my mind, if I look at leaf blowers, I have a residential policy, I have a commercial municipal policy, and possibly a mixed use policy. My instincts tell me, though I don't have that level of knowledge, that each of those kind of 3 buckets of real estate, for lack of a better term, have different needs and flexibilities. For example, if we look at the commercial, that's large asphalt and grass. So versus residential, which is small, typically smaller in scope unless you live in, not my part of the city, I can tell you that much. But I just think, Andrea, that possibly looking into and seeing if we need to break it into residential, commercial, municipal, and mixed use. But at least on the residential, doing something of what Burlingame has done and give us who are now working out of our homes several days out of the week, some relief and some predictability. I want to go back to, I have an idea here too, and this comes from Michelle and the San Mateo Climate Action Plan. You know, in there, in their letter, they said study alternative landscaping methods. Something that might be useful is maybe this city gives awards to those landscapers. It's an acknowledgement. Maybe a presentation at city council meeting and some sort of placard or certificate for being stewards of the soil, demonstrating responsible alternative landscaping methods. Was something when I read their letter and I'd listened to some of the speakers that I thought. I talked about the really need to outreach, and we know this, to our landscapers to understand once July 2024 is here, what's the implications for them. But then likewise, eventually we are going to have a gas ban. It's not an if, it's a when. What are the implications, and how can we make that transition for them? I have a couple more ideas here. A study session to understand, and this would be a study session to understand where is this technology going? And it could be a study session of the representatives of the manufacturers of all these landscaping equipment, Husqvarna, Still, who, you know, there's a whole host of them. Or maybe it's a consultant that says, you know, we could see batteries that could recharge in 30 minutes and last 2 hours, and that could be on the market here in 2026. And I think having that intelligence, if it's possible to get, would help in the planning in terms of phasing out gas powered equipment. And we're only, you know, we're talking leaf blowers, but we've also got lawn mowers and other things as well. So I think some sort of study session where there's a presentation for landscapers and the public to listen to, where is this technology going? And I think that would help in the planning. And then finally, let's see. I would, by the way, update the website and any of our educational material to let people know, and particularly our landscapers, that they can take advantage of all these other rebates besides ours. I think someone mentioned today that I think it was CARB released a pretty, what appeared to be on listening, attractive rebate program. So I think that needs to also get out to take advantage of multiple rebates. You know, similar to what we were talking about with homeowners in moving to heat pump systems. Okay. Oh, one thing other. Mr. Terry mentioned that, and I would just look into this to see if there is a metric to capture leaf blower enforcement. I mean, leaf blower incidences. Because if there isn't, then we should have one that specifically captures these complaints. Thank you.
Commissioner Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for tonight's comments and all the hard work behind it. I support a gas ban, especially one that lines up with ARB's upcoming effectiveness rule and with the late enforcement date. I do think some things to think about if noise is the big issue. I would just be a little worried that a lot of investment may go into battery-operated leaf blowers, and then the conversation may come up again in 3 years on how to address those. So maybe the zoning or thinking about how the noise in general, so this doesn't keep coming up. Some other loopholes I'd want to also think about is make sure in a study session or in thinking about it more that we don't allow generators use. We wouldn't want to see gardeners plug into generators to power their leaf blowers as they go either on their trucks or wherever. I heard that happens in other cities. And I would discourage enforcing the limits on noise levels. That I think is just basically unenforceable. Whoever has a decibel machine, checking that, I I know in Burlingame that's unenforceable and something that we want to change in our city's ordinance. I don't think it needs to be that complicated. I agree that this is coming down the line and we should do everything to support our landscapers, and in trying, it's challenging, but trying to involve them as much as possible in this discussion. I was thinking one idea is maybe talking about the people that have gotten the rebates and where they purchase the electric blowers from. It could be interesting to have flyers of the program at Home Depot, at Ace Hardware, online. Maybe there are some sites that they like to go to, but just making it more and more visible so that when you're going to buy a new blower that, oh, maybe I might as well get electric if, you know, it costs less and maybe just as effective. So I think we could get more creative with the outreach. I think that's it. Thank you. Oh, actually, the only last comment is I would be interested in a study session to hear from the parks crew in other cities, how they're managing it without gas, and if it really is as complicated after they've had some time as we think it is now, or if it did turn out to be simpler than in actual practice. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I just have to jump in quickly and say the technology really is there. I've been using electric for years, and it's old electric. I inherited when my father-in-law passed. The modern stuff is even better. Contractors that work on my house, on the roof, they bring the batteries. It's just not an issue. Enforcement isn't a huge issue. You know, we have parking enforcement all the time, and see something, say something. If somebody parks and blocks my driveway, I call, they come, they take care of it. If I'm, you know, if somebody's next door pumping a gas-powered leaf blower, I'd be happy to call the non-911 number. Lastly, you know, I know people are concerned rightly with the economic impacts on the demographic in this market, but that's why rebates work. It's public funds for a public purpose. You know, this really impacts all of us, the pollution and the noise, but the pollution particularly. So it's a public good, and I think it's about time we look to regulate it and use public funds to fix it. So that's my 2 cents there. Thank you, particularly Andrea, for your presentation and listening to all our stuff. And look forward to seeing how this goes at city study session. Do you have any idea when you plan to schedule that on the council? I mean,
we
council's
estimated February, March.
okay. That'll be fun. Be good. Forward to seeing everybody there. All right. Now it's old business. Bicycle and pedestrian projects update. Christine. This is also an item which we don't vote on, but we are to get a little status report, and then obviously we can give our thoughts on it.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. Sue Ellen Atkinson. I'm the Principal Transportation Planner in the Public Works Department, and I'm here for a bicycle and pedestrian program update tonight. We think. One moment. All right, let's see if this works better. Okay. There we go. All right, so tonight I'll be going over 3 areas in terms of our bike and pedestrian projects that we have currently going on. First, infrastructure projects, then planning projects, and then grant opportunities that we are pursuing. First on the infrastructure projects is the Delaware Safe Routes to School Corridor. So this is a project that the city was awarded active transportation program funding for. It's a Class 4 separated bike lane and bicycle boulevard on Delaware from 19th Avenue South to Pacific Boulevard. The California Transportation Commission formally approved funding for this project in June of 2021. The update on this project is that staff has completed the CEQA documentation for the project. So that was a categorical exemption on file with the county now. And we're in process of requesting the allocation for funding for the design portion of this project. So that's when we'll really start getting rolling on the pre-project planning, identification of impacts, et cetera. Total grant funding for this project, which covers the full cost of environmental design and construction, is $1.66 million. Next up is another grant-funded project. So this is the 28th Avenue Gap Closure Project. We've been funded for design and environmental review for this very short section of 28th Avenue across El Camino Real and then connecting into the new Hillsdale Caltrain station. The update for this project is that we have, City Council has awarded the agreement for design services awarded last month, and staff is currently working on kickoff activities with the consultant. The total project cost for this effort is $170,000. Also in this vicinity was a study at 28th Avenue and 25th Avenue for feasibility of on-street bicycle lane implementation. Update on that is that staff completed, with consultant help, traffic counts at both 25th and 28th Avenues in May 2022. And we finalized the scope with a consultant team to evaluate that data and then conduct traffic analyses to determine the feasibility of those on-street bicycle lane implementations. What we're trying to do there, particularly at 28th Avenue, is accommodate all modes, including vehicles, buses, bikes, and pedestrians in a fairly small area. Next up is the North Central Bike Lanes project, which striping was completed in May of last year. We are continuing implementation of the King Center overnight parking program. In September, 9 permits were issued to residents. We also did a reminder blast on social media around that time, and then 13 permits were issued in October for overnight parking. And then with regard to a potential residential permit program, staff conducted a survey in June and July of this year, and that was sent out to about 3,000 households in the North Central area. We received a total of 588 survey responses and have been analyzing that data. We're also in process of doing a post-project parking data collection to assess current neighborhood parking conditions, and then we'll bring all of that information to City Council around mid-2023. And we will also bring an update to Commission just prior to that. Next up is our integration of our bike and pedestrian projects with our ongoing pavement management program. So we have three projects with a couple of different facilities to update you on. First is Smooth Streets Phase 3. That's the implementation of a bike boulevard on Sunnybrae. That project is currently going through a bit of redesign, and then we've had some wet weather, as I think we've all noticed. So construction on that is on hold for a little bit. Citywide Street Rehabilitation Package 3B, Phase 1, included the potential for Class 2 buffered bike lanes on B Street, which was not implemented given City Council prior direction regarding bike facilities in downtown. It did, however, include implementation of Class 2 bike lanes on South Humboldt Street from 5th Avenue south to 9th Avenue. And then also on 5th Avenue, the implementation of a bicycle boulevard. And then finally, the Citywide Street Rehabilitation Package 3B, Phase 2, On Pacific Boulevard, implementation of Class 2 buffered and standard bike lanes. So here you can see implementation photos left to right of Fifth Avenue Bike Boulevard, the Pacific Boulevard bike lane, and then the Humboldt bike lane near 9th Avenue. And then finally, a newer infrastructure project to update you on is the School Travel Fellowship that the city was involved in conjunction with the San Mateo County Office of Education. Sorry. That fellowship was aimed at evaluating bicycle and pedestrian safety near San Mateo High School and College Park Elementary School. As part of that effort, we received technical assistance from a consultant team and first began by conducting a walk audit in March of 2022. We had 14 participants from the city, from the schools, parents from the neighborhood, County Office of Education, and the consultant team. Taking information from that walk audit, from an online survey that was also available at the same time, and then the technical evaluation, the team produced an improvement map for the vicinity of the school areas, and that identified 11 recommended improvements near College Park and San Mateo High School. Those improvements include flashing beacons, signal changes, and crosswalk improvements. And finally, as part of the fellowship, we were able to implement a pilot installation of 2 of those projects. And so that was a curb extension and crosswalk at College Park Elementary School, and then a curb extension reduction, removal of a right kind of slip lane, and curb extension at Poplar Avenue. So we also at the same time installed these temporary decals that you can see on the left that have a QR code to a survey so that we can get user feedback on the installation and then use that information to tweak the implementation when we get to a place where we can do final design and construction. So this was a really fun opportunity that we received from the county to demonstrate a project in the area. People are getting to try it out. We've been out there observing at dismissal times, and really interesting way to try that. So this project is expected to be in place for about a month. It is temporary materials. So for example, the paint is standard craft paint, which we've had some really good rain in the last week or so. So that's being washed away a little bit, but the improvements are still in place. So if you haven't gotten to go check it out, I'd really encourage that. Next steps here, again, getting information from that survey, and then programming the improvements into the capital improvement program to identify funding for full design and construction. Moving on into planning projects, a very familiar one for you. The Transit-Oriented Development Pedestrian Access Plan, we brought this plan to commission last month. Since that time, we've incorporated commission feedback and feedback from the public. We anticipate adoption later this month at City Council, and total project cost for this effort was $150,000. Next up is the San Mateo Complete Streets Plan. We've been mentioning this one for a bit. We've awarded the consultant agreement for this effort at City Council last month. We are working on the consultant kickoff for this project and are really excited to get that moving forward. Total project cost for this effort is $585,000 and change, of which about $490,000 was a grant from Caltrans. And then in terms of grant updates, we spoke at the last update about the One Bay Area Grant, or OBAG 3 program. We had applied for about $4 million for the Peninsula Interchange project, which also includes bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We were recommended for funding for $1 million. And then we had also applied in conjunction with the San Mateo County Transportation Authority for $3.375 million for a Class 4 bikeway on 19th Avenue and Fashion Island Boulevard. We were recommended for full funding for that project. And then next, San Mateo County Transportation Authority Bicycle and Pedestrian Program. We applied for the downtown parking garage pedestrian safety project. We've been to you before with the design for that project. We were applying for construction funding. Unfortunately, that project was not funded in this cycle of the program. We also applied for more joint funding with the TA for the same 19th Avenue Fashion Island Boulevard project, and we were recommended for full funding for that project. So just a little bit of an orientation for the 19th Avenue area. Turn on the laser pointer. So we have on Delaware from 19th Avenue South is that ATP project that I spoke about before that's getting started into design. And then connecting from there across through on Fashion Island Boulevard is this joint project with the TA and with Samtrans on multimodal elements as part of the 10192 connector project. And so our portion of that the city is primarily working on is that class 4 bike facility on 19th Avenue and Fashion Island that's recommended in our bicycle master plan. And then Samtrans is also involved looking at a mobility hub at the existing Caltrans park and ride lot. So a lot of exciting things going on in this corridor, a lot of things to talk about here. And that wraps it up. So just a reminder that we do have our bicycle project website where you can follow along, and we are updating as much as we can. And we have that interactive map available on the same website. So with that, I'll conclude the staff presentation and available for any questions.
Sue Ellen, thank you so much. Before I bring it back to the commission, Cookie, do we have any, I'm just curious whether we have any public comments at this point.
I see one.
Okay, only one. So I'm going to suggest that we do questions and comments at the commission level now instead of bifurcating it because there's not going to be a whole lot of public impact. And if there is, well, we'll come back to it. And I think I'll start with Commissioner Narita. Sorry.
I thought you wanted the public comment to
No,
go
no.
first.
I think we could. Do people want to do that? We'll let the public,
Yeah.
so that poor soul doesn't have to stay as late as the rest of us. Fair enough. Let's do that. Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's a little break from process, but if you don't tell anybody, I think we can do it. Please, Cookie.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, wait. Darn. Yeah, I knew that.
Okay, Mark Swire.
Hey, thanks for taking public comment now, so I can meet my 9 p.m. bedtime. I appreciate that.
Good. Go for it.
Just kidding. So I wanted to first of all thank Sue Ellen and Public Works team, as well as the commission, for all the great work in making things better for people who want to walk or bike in town. I think San Mateo is definitely doing a great job, but unfortunately there's always room for improvement, and it sounds like we've got a great team together for that. On the bike lanes on Poplar and Humboldt around San Mateo High School, again, I've been working with the high school and the district to increase the number of kids biking and walking to school, and we've seen some improvement there already. Even though the project has not been widely publicized, we're starting to see more and more kids biking to school. Whenever I'm at school, I'll also walk up and down Humboldt, and I'm seeing a steady flow of cyclists, people on scooters. I've seen wheelchairs. I've seen sort of those elderly mobility scooters using the bike lanes. And the other thing I've seen is I think it's made it safer for pedestrians and even drivers. I think the average speed on those roads has decreased because everything's a little tighter. And given the increase in cyclists, everyone's being a little more careful. So that seems like a win. It's only going to get better. I also wanted to mention that I was part of the team with Sue Ellen for the fellowship program at San Mateo High and College Park. And I thank them for the project that they installed. It looks great, and we're seeing benefits. One thing I wanted to mention was, unfortunately, there was a second element to the project that has been put on hold, and I wanted to see if the commission was able to help with that. So in front of San Mateo High School on Delaware, we were trying to improve pedestrian crosswalk safety, given the chaos that can happen there, especially during pickup and drop-off, by forcibly restricting the left turns into the driveway there. There's already a no left turn sign exiting campus, but unfortunately teenagers, of which I have two, don't always follow the rules, and it creates a lot of chaos and a lot of danger for pedestrians. And I've had people hit that are friends of my family. So I would like to ask, unfortunately, the school district nixed the project, or at least a balk to it, and the city has not pushed back on that. So I wanted to see if the commission could write to the school district and ask them to explain their concerns over convenience for vehicles exiting, see if there's anything that can be done there to provide a win-win, because I think it is a really important project and a lot of people spent a lot of time and money on it coming up with that recommendation. And in general, I would hope that the city would always put the safety of students, et cetera, ahead of convenience, and be willing to push back in general when objections are raised, and try to find a win-win instead of simply backing down. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. On that last point, it's highly unusual for the commission to step in, but does city staff have a thought on that issue?
If I may, through the chair, can you all hear me?
Yes. Oh, it's Azalea. Great.
Azalea.
Thank you,
Azalea.
Madam Director. Yes.
Oh, I love this, Madam Clerk, Cookie. I will call you that forever. Well, thank you for the time, and Sue Ellen, thanks for the presentation. Indeed, we were pressed for time on the Safe Routes to School project in terms of the implementation, and it was a last-minute request to remove that part of the project. However, we will follow up with the district. We understand that there's a new administrator, and we just did not have the time to engage because we were pressed for time in terms of the weather and implementing the pilot effort. But we will follow up on that.
Azalea, thank you very much. I don't have many comments, so I'm going to jump in with just this one, because it is there is chaos at San Mateo High School. And my college freshman, yes, do we have more?
One more speaker.
Another public speaker? Okay, well, that's excellent. Then I'll hold my comment. Please.
Sean Lascon.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. Just wanted to lend my support to a lot of the great projects that were covered during the report. Some of the areas that I wanted to give focus to were the complete streets plan. I'm hoping that as this plan gets underway, if there are additional ways to comment and give feedback on how to add more traffic calming measures on residential streets, such as, for example, where I often walk and bike on Ellsworth Avenue, just north of the San Mateo downtown area. Just given the layout of that street, it's a very long block. It's very easy for cars to easily take advantage of that and exceed, safe driving limits on that street. Would love to see, either speed bumps or some other type of traffic calming measure implemented on our residential streets where it's very common that we have the grid layout in the dense, center of our city. And just make walking and biking a much more pleasant experience for all. Second area that I wanted just to lend my support to, I know we didn't get funding for this, but the downtown parking garage pedestrian safety project, I really hope that the city is able to get funding for this in the future. Just from my own personal experience, I often see drivers blow past the stop signs at the exit points of these parking garages, and they'll either, blow completely past the sidewalk without really taking the time to look and see if there are people crossing that sidewalk before exiting the garage, before making their turn onto the street, or they will just sit and park on the middle of the sidewalk blocking pedestrians, and while the driver takes precedence and waits for an opportunity to turn. So I would also love to see if funding can get implemented for this safety project, so that way we can add traffic calming measures such as speed bumps or or even gates that open and close as a car wants to exit. I've seen that implemented in other cities. But again, I really appreciate the work that the commission and the city is doing in our city, and I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, anything more?
No other speakers.
It's written right here, otherwise I would call you Cookie, but okay. Thank you, and thanks for our two public speakers. I'm just going to be very brief and say that I appreciate everything the staff is doing here, and particularly good luck on the chaos at San Mateo High School. My daughter's now a college freshman, but I just spent 4 years, not counting the COVID time, either biking, watching her bike, praying that she'd get there alive, or picking her up and driving and praying I didn't hit anybody. It's chaos over there. And I don't know of an easy answer, but hopefully you'll get some good feedback from what your that project. Questions or comments? Go down. Commissioner Narita.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Sue Ellen, as always, for a wonderful presentation. And I'm always constantly impressed with the navigating of all the different grants to get the jobs done. And it's just really inspiring. So thank you. So a couple questions and clarifications. On the Delaware project, the Safe Routes to School one, in the timeline of that project, is there still an opening to figure out, does that one little piece have to be a bike boulevard, or is that like established, like that little piece of dotted yellow, like dotted orange, has to be a bike boulevard in that specific area, when the rest of it is like a bike lane?
It's actually pretty well split in half, class 4 and then bike boulevard going further south.
Yeah.
But as part of the pre-project planning, we do traffic counts and analysis to confirm that the bike boulevard is the indicated facility. And if it's indicated that we need to consider a different type of bike facility, then we would make that modification. For example, on the Humboldt project, one portion of that was proposed to be a bike boulevard, but in looking at the traffic counts, that was not the indicated facility for that portion. So we did upgrade it to a class 2 bike lane for the full extent. So we have done that, and we'll follow industry guideline.
Got it. And that part that's right now the bike boulevard is a segment that would connect into like the new Pacific Boulevard bike lane, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, because that makes me, I drive and walk that's my neighborhood, and like, I would be nervous because once folks turn the corner on that right turn, when you're going down Hillsdale and then you make that kind of right into that weird area and you spit out on Pacific, people just will like blaze through and then come around, and I would just, that's the part that makes me really nervous because like I think I understand that it's narrower, and also there's construction there right now, so I also can't tell how wide the street actually will be in the end of all things, but I would just be nervous about that being a bike boulevard in that particular area. Cool. And then I also just had like a logistic question, like what does red paint signify in the school fellowship program pictures? Like what's the difference between red and like the green is the bike lanes, I know that, but I didn't know what red meant.
Red was to catch people's attention.
Oh, okay, because in other cities it's bus lanes. It's like code for bus lane.
It's in the implementation, I was saying it's temporary materials. Yeah. We were actually painting tempera paint on the ground, so regular craft paint. So we were only limited by the colors that came in, which is primary colors. I mean, elementary school art room colors. And the yellow was a little light. Green is bike lane. Yeah. And we had seen in a similar pilot implementation in Daly City, they had actually used the red tempera paint on the ground. And even when faded, it was still a terracotta color that was still recognizable as something to pay attention to. To pay attention to, correct. And so using that as a guideline, we chose the red color.
Okay, got it. So there's no like if something becomes more permanent, there's no like coding of color it'll just be whatever the city decides at that time.
Correct.
Okay, great. Because I was like, there's no bus lane here. What are we doing? Okay, great. And then there were two projects that one got less funding than originally requested, the Peninsula Interchange, and then the other one was the downtown parking garage that got no funding. Like, what happens then? So when the city successfully obtained 1 million of the 4 million asked, like what happens to that scope of work or that timeline or stuff like that for that project?
So for the OBAG program, we had requested, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was $5 million toward construction. And I believe the program was oversubscribed. So they were looking at what phasing options would be available or partial funding of projects might be available. And we were offered or asked if we would be able to utilize 1 million toward design instead of construction. And we were able to accept that. Or to make that change. So in that case, we would have the funding for design. For the San Mateo County Bicycle and Pedestrian Program for the downtown parking garage project, we were hoping to obtain the full construction funding for that project. Since we did not receive it through that program, we're including it in the capital improvement budget to request funding for it for the next budget that's approved, and we'll also continue to look for grant funding as well.
Okay, great. So there's like an alternative, potential hopeful option there. Awesome. And then my last question, and it'll be no surprise because I asked it before, but on the Pacific Boulevard bike lane, how if at all have you been able to talk to Belmont about the like really dangerous part after San Mateo on Pacific Boulevard, where I regularly see folks bike, and it really freaks me out because it's just so. It's quite like car. There's a lot of car maintenance and service areas there, and so the traffic is quite high to get in and out of those businesses, and there's no bike lane or anything there, and I'm just very anxious for our residents and also residents coming from Belmont who want to go to like Hillsdale, biking along this beautiful Pacific bike lane that we now have in our city but is unconnected in the neighboring city.
We have not coordinated with Belmont on their portion on Pacific right now. It's something that I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do in the future. I did see that Belmont is working on options for Alameda, which is pretty interesting, so we're keeping an eye on that. But no, on Pacific, we have not yet coordinated with them.
Okay. That would be great if that can happen. I'm just so nervous that someone's going to get hurt there. I really am. Because it's such a nice bike lane that you guys did for our city, so thank you for that. All right, that's it on questions and comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Lorraine, you are on.
Thank you. So, Ellen, I'd like to ask a little more about the 25th and 28th study, please. So you mentioned that counts have been completed. And can you maybe just give me a high-level idea of like what comes next and what the timeline for it might be?
Sure. So yes, we've conducted the counts, so we have that data in hand. Next is we've scoped out the project with the consultant to evaluate the data and evaluate doing the traffic analysis to determine the feasibility of removing a lane if we were going to move in that direction. Also looking, in terms of on-street bicycle facilities, there's option for Class 2, there's option for Class 4. Looking at the Samtrans routing in that vicinity as well to determine how we can best make that area work. And then in terms of the general traffic analysis, doing queuing analysis, if we reduce down to one lane, does that result in queuing on El Camino, which is a Caltrans facility? So that is generally what's involved in that scope. We've identified the consultant, we've finalized the scope, we just need to issue that.
Okay.
So I believe that the timeline for starting is fairly soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. I did just want to ask about I think like sort of rapid implementation, piloting some stuff over at Bays Road in Bay Meadows, where we had that unfortunate brush back of a child could you, I don't mean to spring it on you, but it seemed to me like it might be somewhat tangential, and I was just curious, like, how, maybe if you wouldn't mind just explaining a little bit of like what has been put in place there and how it's going.
I'll actually ask if Azalea can chime in on that.
Yes. Hi, Swan. Hi. Azalea Mitch, Public Works Director. Yes, well, as you all have seen, we placed a temporary lane reduction, and we've been monitoring how effective that is going in terms of reducing speeds. We are currently monitoring speeds. We're taking readings. The next step will involve evaluating a few options in terms of either making that lane reduction permanent or installing stop signs, which we are also collecting data on, or whether we should put in a hawk signal, which is similar to a rapid flashing signal, but it's actually red lights that require vehicles to stop. So those are the improvements that we are evaluating. Because the area is rather close to the freeway, we need to make sure that whatever permanent implementation is done doesn't have a broader impact on just vehicles in terms of queuing. So we're in the process of assessing the temporary improvements as we then plan out what options to come back to council with in terms of permanent implementation.
Thank you, Director Mitch. Swellen, can you give us a sense of, I'm hoping we're going to get this commission an opportunity to dive into the Complete Streets plan once we get kicking off. And so do you have a sense of around when that might be?
The answer is yes. We've built into the scope bringing the plan to the commission several times over the course of the project. Offhand, I don't recall when the first time will be. Several months into development for an introduction and existing conditions review.
Thank you. And I think just a comment or two. Echoing praise for pursuing some of these projects and the funding for them, particularly on 19th. I've had the displeasure of biking on 19th a whole lot more lately, and so that sounds wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it. It's pretty tough right now. I mean, you were mentioning the chaos. I was having flashbacks of 19th, so I think it's wonderful that we've multiple funding sources seem to be converging into making a protected bike lane possible in that area. That's huge. I think particularly as someone who is, if I happen to live in the Hillsdale area, and if I want to go to Foster City, that is one of the potential options. So that is great. I wanted to thank staff for working on this SMCOE project and thank Mike Swire for helping out with it. Thank Director Mitch for agreeing to follow up on the second piece of that project and seeing if we can do even more. And I will be interested in going over there and checking it out before more rain falls, maybe. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Orwinski.
Sure. My questions are going to focus on North Central and my comments too. In the King Center, currently there's 21 permits that have been issued. What is the parking capacity of the King Center?
We have a maximum of 30 permits available per month. There are 34 spaces there.
Okay, so there's 34. So that's pretty good. You filled that up in 2 months. I mean, 21 permits in September and October.
You need a new permit for each month, so it was 9 permits in September.
Okay, so
and
it's
then
a
13
monthly.
in October.
Okay,
Correct.
so it's a monthly type of, and the same person can keep reapplying.
Correct.
but it is for a month. Okay, thank you. On the residential permit program, what is that kind of shaping up to look like? Can you explain that a bit? I know you have to look at the survey responses, but obviously you went out there with some sort of framework in order to get those responses. What's that looking like?
It's difficult to answer that because we went out with a very broad set of questions. We were trying to get some information on parking characteristics in the neighborhood, on resident vehicle ownership, and then on various parameters for what a parking permit program could look like.
Okay.
So some of those parameters are identical to our existing residential parking permit program, but others varied. So we asked questions about how many permits per household makes sense, and offered, do you think one permit per licensed driver makes sense like in our current program, or other options? So I think that we'll have a lot more information to share in the spring when we come to the commission and council. But we asked a very wide, varying set of questions.
Okay, alrighty, thanks. And then also too, I remember when we were going through this in February, there was discussion about parking on the apron parking. Is that still possible, or we don't know at this point? I guess in apron parking. And I also recall parking on one's front lawn.
Apron parking or parking in parallel in front of your driveway,
Yeah,
that is still allowed. That's a parking program that's available on our website, information about that in a diagram. Parking on one's lawn, we have heard some instances of that. That was not an official educational program or suggestion that was shared.
Okay, alrighty. All right, because I'll be really curious, to see as we continue our efforts to help these folks mitigate their parking situation based on the implementation of the bike lanes. I will share with you at the Monday City Council meeting, there was an elderly North resident speaker. Okay, did you hear her? Okay, about the sidewalk, and she's not able to park in front of her house because of the bike lanes. Okay, so someone's going to follow up with her.
Yes, Commissioner Lewinsky, we are, and it was with respect to a blue curb and also sidewalk repairs. So
Right.
not associated with the bike lane, but we
Okay.
are following up. Yes, I've been in touch with the resident.
Okay, great, good. Thank you, Director Mitch. And then, while somewhat outside the scope, what is the status of this our Hillsdale Bike Pede overpass? Is that ever going to get on the radar screen?
We submitted a grant request recently to evaluate feasibility for how to accomplish the bike ped overcrossing. The existing design that we have, the cost came back very high,
Right.
and we haven't been successful in obtaining grant funding to implement that. Also, with recent geometry changes on 101, that may render that design infeasible. We're not certain. So what we're trying to do is look at feasibility of the existing design, of alternate options for doing an overpass, or of reutilizing the existing overcrossing at Hillsdale. So we have submitted a grant application to do that feasibility study. I don't have any information on that yet.
So at least some progress is being made on that particular overpass in
Correct.
terms, right, okay, very good. Because I'll look forward to hearing about that once we get some funding to do what I hear you saying, looking at some options on feasibility. Okay, that's it for me. Oh, yeah, no, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Michael.
I don't have any questions, just it's exciting to see all these projects in place. I know there's a lot of hard work behind each one of those, getting the grants, the funding, the consultant team. And I just want to also voice support for that creative use of the paint to really engage the public, also the decals on the ground. I've seen in my neighborhood like decals on street poles for different projects, and I think that's a really innovative and effective way to get the public involved.
Thank you. I'll share those comments with the full Public Works team.
Well, and thank you very much. And our compliments to the full team and to you. Thank you very much. That is the substantive part of the meeting. Reports and announcements. Everybody should have gotten the crystal ball. Kathy, anything to add? Director Mitch, hiding behind us?
I have something to add.
Okay, you'd like? Commissioner Rowinski?
Sure. Also, during the Monday City Council meeting, there was a presentation as it relates to infrastructure and Kathy, you were there. San Mateo is now, I guess, certified or to be certified as an age-friendly city. And there was a presentation by Monica Lee, and I don't remember who the city staff person was, but one of those items had to do with sidewalks as it relates to for seniors. And so I understand that report was recently given to Public Works, but it would be a nice item to add to our agenda sometime maybe in 2023. Sure.
If I may,
Please, yep.
Commissioner Rowinski. So that is part of our ADA database. So the recommendations from the age-friendly city have been included in our database, and so the approach is to integrate them into our capital improvement projects. Yes, so that is part of the approach in terms of opportunities that we do have as we are paving roads, to take a look at networks and any sidewalk improvements, as well as ramps that need to be rebuilt to comply with ADA. So we've integrated the recommendations from that plan into our database.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other announcements? No, I think this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.